back to the Bites and Bites podcast. Today, I am joined by Jake Leguee, a third-generation farmer from Saskatchewan, Canada, who's seen firsthand how farming has changed and how much it still depends on the people behind it. Jake and I talk about what modern farming really looks like now, from GPS-guided equipment and connected machines to the realities of running a business that feeds people around the world. We also get into what happens when technology stops working and how farmers are adapting in a system that's becoming more digital every season. It's a grounded, honest look at the future of food from someone who lives and works with it every day. Let's get started. Well, we're really lucky to have this guest today because the weather gods, if you will, have allowed him to step out of the field, which is amazing. And we can have a conversation. So before we go into intros and everything, Jake, I really want to know, what is your favorite food and your favorite food memory? They do not need to be the same thing.
Well, for most of my younger years, we had cattle on our farm. So favorite food is an easy pick. That's steak. Favorite food memory, I'm gonna say two. So as a kid, my favorite place to go was Pizza Hut. We used to have Pizza Hut buffets here in Canada everywhere. And the smell when you walked in was always so wonderful. And my second pick is durum is one of the main crops on our farm. Mm-hmm. Now, most of the durum that we grow gets shipped off to North Africa and Italy. So I went on, they're called New Crop missions a few years ago, back in 2019. So I traveled to these countries with a group of Canadian representatives, and I actually got to see what the products look like after they're taken over there and manufactured. And I didn't know that durum gets made into a type of bread that's very specific to Southern Italy and Altamira. They call it Altamira bread. It's a yellow bread with a really hard crust, and it is fantastic, but unfortunately it only lasts a couple of days before it gets too hard to eat. So I only was able to have it there, and I've never been able to have it since, but it was quite spectacular.
That's amazing that they have those kind of, I want to say, like exchange programs, if you will, to understand where your crop is going. That's brilliant. I didn't even know they did that. That's amazing. What a great idea. And it's durum wheat, for those who are not familiar with what durum means. Yeah, durum wheat is normally made into pasta, right? Is the primary thing it's made into, and bread. Those are the two main functions for it, right?
That's right, yeah. And couscous actually in North Africa would be another main dish. So that was also pretty cool to try for the first time in Morocco and Tunisia. The reason we do those trips is because it's basically a marketing ploy. Mm. We go over there with Canadian representatives to speak to buyers and processors and everybody else to make sure that they're happy with the product and to make sure that they know the best ways to utilize it when they're mixing it with products from other countries and that sort of thing. So a farmer goes along to answer questions because farmers have the on-the-ground knowledge that buyers are really interested in finding out about how it's grown, right?
Yeah.
So they aren't going to get that information anywhere else.
That's fantastic. I know we're going to get jumping ahead here, but is durum your only crop that you have on your farm primarily, or is that just the largest portion of it?
It's one of the larger crops. In Western Canada, we tend to grow at least two crops. On our farm in Southern Saskatchewan, we grow quite a few more. Canola, durum, hard red spring wheat, which is, that's for bread. Large grain lentils and flax would be our primary crops here.
That's great. And go ahead, Jake, and introduce yourself since you kind of already started on that road.
Sure. So my name is Jake Leguee. I'm a third generation farmer here in Southern Saskatchewan. Farm here with several family members. We grow several crops, as I mentioned. And our goal is just to try to build this into an operation that can stand the test of time and make it to the fourth generation.
That's amazing. What's your earliest memory of being on the farm, since you are third generation, so you've been around it, obviously? And why did you decide to continue to farm when you had other options?
Yeah, that's actually a hard question because I've been here my whole life. Obviously, it's hard to remember specific memories, but certainly, I remember, like I mentioned, we had cattle, so I remember helping Dad open gates and feed them and everything else, and I remember tractor naps behind the seat.
Tractor naps, I love it.
Yeah, behind the seat of a couple of our tractors. I remember there was a bit of a little platform there, and I remember used to have naps up on there while Dad was going back and forth in the field.
Yeah, you just made me smile too, because I had a memory of my dad used to plow when he wasn't a fireman. And sometimes it would be in the middle of a snowstorm and you'd be driving between jobs and you take like the plow cab nap, if you will, when we were younger, because we just go to hang out. But yeah, you just made me smile because I remember that. That's great. So farming's changed a lot over these three generations, right? What stayed the same and what feels like science fiction compared to what your grandparents were dealing with?
I guess in some sense, we are still doing the same basic task. We're still putting seeds in the ground and controlling weeds and harvesting them at the end of the season. Generally speaking, we're growing some of the same crops like wheat and flax, for example. We have some new ones over the course of the last generation or two, like canola and lentils. But, the general principle of farming is really the same as it's been for the past 10,000 years. But the process of how we get there has certainly changed a lot. I mean, it was when I was still in, not high school yet, Dad bought our first auto steer kit for our tractor. I remember driving down the road and you could see the farmers that had invested in auto steer, you could see how straight their lines were. Like, it was very noticeable. So even the best operators couldn't run a perfectly straight line down the field, right? You get fatigued, and there's only so much you can do to be perfect all day. So those were very obvious. And I just remember Dad saying, like, we really need to get this, but it was so expensive, of course, at the time that it was hard to make that leap. But at that time, there was lots of companies coming out with their own versions of auto steer. Some of them were more accurate than others, but the reality is that any type of auto steer was more accurate than hand steering. So the first one Dad got, I think, was AccuSteer, and it would move, a foot to 2 feet side to side up and down the pass. But again, still so much better than hand steering. So that seemed like space age technology at the time, of course. And the other thing I remember transitioning was the first time Dad got an actual screen in our sprayer. So previously, at the end of the boom, it would just drop out a little piece of foam every few feet. So when you're driving down the next pass of the sprayer, because there's, you can't see what you've done with the sprayer, right? It's not like you're seeding or tilling or anything like that. You can't see what you've done. So you have to have some way of marking your pass. So it would drop foam, and you just try to line up your boom with the foam. But on a hot day, that foam would vanish very quickly. So it was quite difficult. The next step was a light bar. So there was a little bar on the windshield with some lights that would, if they were in the green, right in the middle, you were in the middle of the pass. But once Dad got a screen that had a color image of where you'd been, suddenly you didn't miss anything anymore because you knew exactly where the sprayer had been. If you went around a slough and there was a spot that needed to get filled in, you knew it was there. So that was pretty cool. Everything since then has been, just sort of iterative progress, one step at a time, to the point now where so much of it is automated, we can't do very much anymore without GPS and auto steer and all of these things. But the job that we're doing is just so much better than it ever was in those days. The precision of our operations is substantially improved. I remember a few years ago asking my grandmother, who passed away a couple of years ago now, what she thought of all the changes, and she was just blown away by it. She just thought it was so cool that we could do all this stuff that they couldn't even dream of. It wasn't even a thought, right? So yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
That's amazing. I really appreciate that. It's such an interesting world we live in where we can create this kind of technology to be able to do what we do. Because otherwise, I would assume if you oversprayed or overseeded in certain areas, you always expect a loss in that regard for that field in certain sections, and you knew that was going to happen. And now you don't have to do that because the machines are so efficient and you know exactly what your yield's going to look like. I mean, other than like weather and other, things that are going to affect the field. I really am excited to have you on the show because I really want to walk through what a typical day looks like for you. Can you highlight where the technology is being used all the way from, if you want to take it from seed to harvest, you can do that as well. But what's a typical day for you, Jake?
I would say that there is no typical day. So I think the best way would be to just kind of walk through the season.
Sure. Pick your favorite season because that will be easier for you to talk about. I don't want you to talk about your least favorite.
Yeah, well, I like them all in their own ways. I do like harvest a lot because that's where you get to see the results of all the work that you put in. They aren't always good results. Sometimes they're disappointing. Sometimes you go into harvest knowing that it's not going to be good. Sometimes you go in and are disappointed by what you get. But it's always enlightening to see it, right? To just finally be able to see, okay, this is what we got. Mm-hmm. So at harvest time, our days are a lot more structured. It'll typically go on for 4 to 6 weeks of relatively steady, get up in the morning, go to the combines, get them ready. They need fuel. They need all the moving parts need lubrication every so many days, I clean the windows, clean the cabs, and you get in. And once the crop is sort of dried down, because, we have to get some humidity overnight to make it kind of damp. Once we're past that, you get in the cab and away you go. We're a larger farm in the sense that there's several people here. So we don't always run the same things. We have a couple of guys that have their jobs, but those of us that are the family team, we do jump from job to job. So one day I might be running one of those combines. Another day I might be hauling grain away from the field in a semi. Another day I might be running we have a grain cart in the field that collects the grain from the combine and takes it to the edge of the field where it puts it into the semi so we aren't driving fully loaded semis around in our fields. Those would be kind of the three main jobs, but there's also a lot of other things to do. I mean, some of our crops like lentils, they'll just stay green forever unless you desiccate them. So it's just a contact herbicide that you go in and just spray them to finish them off. Usually they're pretty well dead, but there's some spots that just won't finish, or there's some weeds that you need to deal with. So there's jobs like that to do. Sometimes there's the post-harvest jobs that need to be done. Like sometimes we get a big crop and there's a lot of straw left behind. So we go in with something called a harrow and drag that through the field to sort of spread the straw around a bit better. And so that's sort of what harvest looks like for that 4 to 6 weeks. In some years, you get in the combine and you go every single day until you're done and you're exhausted. And there's other years where it rains every 3 days and it ruins the crop and it's just an absolute fight to get it off. So you never really know which of those is going to be.
And you can't take if it's a certain type of moisture level, right? It has to stay in the ground unless it's it has to be a certain dryness or a certain moist level or whatever. That must be really disheartening when it's been raining forever and you just need to pull it and it needs to go. I would assume that would be probably one of the lowest points of farming in general, is knowing you put all this effort in and you can't take it. Or if you do, it's going to be a less than desirable crop that year and it might be chicken feed instead of pasta, or whatever ends up happening to it. I'm sure that is sort of the high-low game, right? Like you're really high because you're like, yeah, we did this and it's awesome. We're going to totally take it out of the ground now. And then you're like, oh, great. Well, I guess this year is just sort of what it is. And then you move on. And I would assume that the adrenaline spikes are pretty good throughout the whole process in general. I've had other farmers describe it as almost like a child. Their field becomes almost like a child because they've been rearing it and raising it and all these things. And then at the end of it, they want it to be the best it can possibly be before it goes to wherever it needs to go. And you basically just described that.
Break. And before we get back to Jake and our conversation, I just wanted to say thank you. The Bites and Bites podcast has just turned 2 years old.
Happy birthday!
And we're sitting at nearly 13,000 downloads. That's because of you, the people who listen, share, and keep these conversations going. As we head into year 3, I'm really excited about where we're going next. We're going to explore more of the sectors that make up our food system, from farms and oceans to labs, logistics, and everything in between. You'll hear more global voices, more people working hands-on with the products that feed us, and more conversations about how data and technology are reshaping the way food gets to our table. And maybe even a few topics you never even thought about before. Thank you for being part of this community. If you're enjoying the show, take a second to like, comment, and share it. It really does help more people find the show. All right, back to our conversation with Jake.
Columbines are basically like little moving computers, aren't they? For the most part nowadays, they actually have connection. They're connected to satellites and things like that. And the GPS, obviously, for more precision based. When I look at Columbines and I think they're so complicated, I'm sure you probably get them and it's just second nature to you now. How was the learning curve for that for you? Did you take a course? Are you continually learning? What does that look like, Jake?
Well, the course I took was running a combine when I was 12 years old. So yeah, there are actually clinics and stuff that you can go to that the dealerships will put on, but that's not the same as being in the cabin running it. So when we get somebody new on the farm, it's very rare that we hire somebody that hasn't run something. Running a combine is not super complicated as long as there's other combines in the field. Like we run 4. So if one of them has a novice operator, we've got radios in the cab that we can talk to each other. It's more about just getting the settings right. They're trying to automate some of that. Some of that has worked well. Some of it hasn't. On the specialty crops, it's still much the same as it has been for a long time. We're setting combines ourselves. It's all from the cab, of course, but looking at the sample that's in the hopper, in the grain tank, How much trash is in there? Are we cracking seeds? Are we doing a good job? That's still something that we have to monitor. And there is a certain feel that you get running a machine like that, sitting in the cab. You can hear it, you can feel it when you're pushing it hard enough. Now, one of the things that has greatly improved is automated speed management. So you can tell it, I want to load the combine to X percentage of engine load. So basically, how hard is the engine working? And that works pretty well. You do still have to be paying attention though, because if you happen to hit a heavy spot, it's measuring on engine load. So if you hit that spot going too fast, it'll bring that combine down real fast if it's too heavy and it's moving too quickly. So there's still a lot of responsibility that comes with running these very large, very expensive, and like you said, very complicated machines. We understand how they work here because we've been around them for so long and we've been inside of them and pulled things apart and all that sort of stuff. But they are complicated machines. There's a lot of bearings, there's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of computers these days. I don't know how many ECMs there are in a combine today, but there's a lot. And yeah, it's connected to the internet, it's connected to satellites, it's uploading data all the time. It's pretty cool stuff that we can actually see what it's doing in real time.
It's really fascinating too, because it's gathering the crop and it holds it in storage, and then you have to obviously offload it in real time while the columbine's moving. And I think that in itself is such an interesting, I guess, I don't want to use the term game, but you can miss the shoot if you overshoot or undershoot. So I think it's really interesting the dance that has to be done with it. And I have such respect for it because it also requires a bit of precision driving, and not just from the columbine, but for the people that are coming alongside to grab the crop. Because like you said, it will put too much strain on it if it's not taken out. I find that really fascinating. What do you listen to while you're harvesting in the columbine? Do you tend to listen to music or podcast on? Do you not listen? Do you stay in silence because you don't know if the radio is going to go off? Is there something that's part of your ritual of harvest?
I guess all of the above. Yeah, some days it's podcasts or audiobooks. Some days it's just music. Some days, I just turn the radio off, and it's not really because of anything other than sometimes you just, in this job, there's so many things calling on you at all the time, because for those of us operating farms, it isn't just operating the machine that we're doing. It's also the 12 phone calls you get that day from suppliers and marketing organizations, and you're trying to sell grain and you're trying to organize all the logistics of getting that grain from those combines into a bin at home. Which bin is it going into? Which bin are we going to next? What's the moisture percentage? Do we need to think about potentially drying it? There's a lot of things to figure out in a day. So sometimes sitting in silence is just the best thing.
The amount of multitasking that you're doing is pretty incredible. And I don't think that people associate multitasking with farming, but you are multitasking heavily, like you just said. And that's not even considering maybe just the thoughts running in your own subconscious that generally just kind of coming up, like thinking about, what's happening with the kids, or what's going on with family, or what's going on with the weather, or whatever. It's really quite the game that happens in your head as well while you're doing this. I applaud you, because most people can't multitask past 3 things, and you've got a lot of moving parts literally going on. And also you're dealing with the natural world. So there's definitely a lot of curveballs, if you will, thrown into that situation at times. So let's get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty of like the tech and things like that. So have you or anyone experienced a technology failure, a hack, or any issues that have happened? And what do you think about the vulnerabilities of the equipment and systems that you use? And it doesn't necessarily have to be the columbine. It could be anything you have on the farm.
Yeah, there's always the risk of things failing, and those things do happen, breakdowns and whatever. We don't just have mechanical breakdowns today. We also have electronic problems that can stop our machines. And then we have to get the dealership to come out and try to deal with it. That is a challenge. There's a lot less that we can do now because the machines are so managed by their internal software. And most of that we aren't really permitted to do anything with. We do depend on our dealers to handle that. That's where a lot of the right to repair stuff has really come to, into agriculture as well, not just electronics, consumer electronics and that. It's also an important conversation in agriculture, because we do need to talk about how much control farmers that own these machines should have over the operations of them. Because on the one hand, these are our machines. We have spent a lot of money to buy them. But on the other hand, these are very sophisticated software programs that are running these engines and all of the other things that go into these machines. And if we play with them too much, we could cause ourselves a lot of grief. But, I think there needs to be some trust put in place for a lot of the staff that we have. Like my brother-in-law, for example, it's a journeyman mechanic that worked at a John Deere dealership for a lot of years. He knows how to look after these machines, and granting him the tools to be able to do that, even if we have to pay for them, I think would help us keep our machines moving. When we have some of these very small issues that it'll shut the combine down for, or the sprayer. But yeah, there is a bit of a delicate balance there. As far as external threats from, cybersecurity or those types of things, I don't know anybody who's had anything happen to their machines in the field or to their data on places like John Deere Operations Center, but we all have become more aware that it's a threat, and none of us really know what to do about it. We don't really have a lot of good tools. Most of our businesses are small enough. We don't have a bunch of LinkedIn computers in an office. We have an office in our farm, but I have one staff member who works there full time, but otherwise, it's just me and my sister that are in and out of there a bit. So we don't have the kind of network that a lot of businesses have, where we have a company that manages it. So I think us and a lot of other farmers are really in the dark about how to manage a lot of this stuff. We just don't have the time, the knowledge, or the resources to know where to go to try to safeguard some of our systems.
Yeah, that's a common theme I've heard from many people in agriculture in various different parts of it. Essentially, you are running a small business or a potentially medium to large business, depending on how big your operation is. The thing that I've noticed the most is the touch points. Where does technology intersect, and where do you have access to it? Because a lot of people are like, oh, we're not a target. We wouldn't be important. We don't have, and you just said it, we don't have network computers. I think about mobile devices. You probably have your email on there. I think about the fact that you are very much in public with your leadership roles and your blog and things like that. That puts you in a different bracket for people to potentially exploit, because you're known. I'm not telling you not to be known, Jake. Please don't read that like that. But there's different places where social engineering can come into play. Agroterrorism and ecoterrorism is something that it's becoming more predominant in the agricultural field, unfortunately. And I'm not talking just about relevant news. I'm talking about like radical extremists and that are going after farms in really just nasty ways that are really targeting the mental health even more than the mental health issues that are happening within agriculture. They're using technical and digital ways of doing that, whether that's bullying or harassing online and things like that, on top of other really nasty tactics that are just gross. We don't need to get into that in this episode. However, the thing that scares me is those groups are being enabled by nation states. Fortunately, Canada, as an example, and parts of the United States, the dairy industry has been really targeted heavily recently. Things like that. So I'm worried about how do we empower a farmer without burdening, right? That's the trick for what I think about. How do I make you feel encouraged that you understand how to keep yourself safe if something did happen without adding just more to your multitasking list? It really shouldn't be something you think about, because you just need to be about the business of farming, right? That's what your occupation is. That's what your lifestyle is. That's what you want to do. You shouldn't have to be worried about all of this potential insert moviness here of weirdness that could potentially happen because of technology running amok. Ultimately, I do think that there will be probably regulations and policies that will come down to try to help, but ultimately it's going to still fall onto you and yours, Jake, because like you said, the right to repair is a great example. It's going to be that kind of feeling where we know it's there, we know it's bad, we know the vendors know, we know the dealers know, we know that's happening. But because they don't design their products with security in mind, whose responsibility does it end up being? The farmer. And that's the thing that kind of ticks me off, is I feel like there should be responsibility taken on the people who create the products that you use in order to farm and sustain your farm. Again, I could get on a soapbox for quite a while about this because it really frustrates me. The people who ultimately need the most assistance and the most understanding about this and empathy would be the farming community, not the people that are creating the tech. Ag tech is what it is. So thank you for that. I really do struggle with not getting too emotionally upset about it when I talk about it, because it's a disservice to you. And that's what makes me upset. You feed the world. Obviously, you've already said that you feed the world. And it bothers me when I have to sit here and say, hey, there's no good answers right now. However, maybe someday something will happen. And that's not good enough. That's not good enough, because we're just going to keep adding more and more tech. And we're going to keep making the tech more sophisticated and more challenging to repair. And that means the hackers are going to have a way in and out and exploit vulnerabilities. And we've already seen that happen with different patchings of systems and things like that. CrowdStrike, Microsoft is a really great example. It was like a Jenga peg got popped out and everything fell down. But we don't need that for the farming community. We definitely don't need that for the farming community. That's way too much stress. I guess within all this conversation, I kind of want to know a few things about farming a little bit more. Let's get into this a little bit more. Let's get away from this gloom and doom. We'll go back to it in a little bit, but let's get away from it for a moment. What keeps you farming, Jake? Why do you keep farming? And I know that this is kind of a strange question in some ways to listeners who are like, well, he's a farmer. Of course, he's going to keep farming. You could have done something else, Jake. Why did you continue on with this generation? And what do you hope to have your family continue with this generational farming? Yeah,
well, certainly I did consider doing other things. When I graduated high school in 2006, farming was not a great industry to be in. I mean, there was a lot of people leaving the industry. Land prices hadn't moved in 25 years. Banks weren't interested in lending against it. It was a difficult time in the industry. And Dad had a series of just poor crops in a row, poor grain prices. So there wasn't a lot of equity and there wasn't a lot of, I guess, optimism for the future. So when I went to university, I went into agriculture, but I intended to do something else. But things changed quite rapidly in the late 2000s, and what we kind of call now the great commodity boom. Oil and grain prices and everything else really, really exploded. And finally, land prices started to change, and which was a great signal of the industry finally finding some optimism. Now, that won't necessarily last forever. Nothing goes up forever, and land prices have been going up for a long time. So there is, of course, the risk that we turn over into that type of pessimism again. But the thing about farming, and this is actually what I struggled with when I was trying to decide what to do, is I was interested in a lot of different things. But what's amazing about agriculture is you get to do all of these different things throughout the growing season, right? You can be an agronomist, you can be a mechanic, you can be a truck driver, a combine operator, a sprayer operator, truck driver, business, logistics, marketing. All of these things are within the banner of farming, even just side interests like meteorology and, watching weather and those types of things. We get to do all of them. Now, as farms grow larger and get more staffing, our roles become more differentiated. And I do have much more specific roles now than I had when I first started. But I've been able to divert my role into what I'm most interested in, which is agronomy and finance. And I wouldn't have it any other way than to do this. I had a financial advisor ask a little while ago, what would you do if you got a big enough offer on your farm? What would you do after that? And I said, well, I just wouldn't take it. Like there really isn't an amount of money that would convince me to stop doing this, because if that ever happened, I'd probably just end up buying another farm somewhere else. Like it just, there's something about this industry that you mentioned a little while ago about the adrenaline that comes at different parts of the season. It's a very interesting business because we take millions of dollars, we go sink it into the ground, and we just try our best to get the best crop that we can, given the weather that we get. And every week there's another clue that comes along to tell us what we might end up with. But tomorrow we could get a severe storm that wipes out half the crop. You just don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. No 2 days are the same. No 2 years are the same. And we also get to work with our families. I mean, if my 4-year-old wants to come join me for a day, he can come join me for a day. There's nothing to stop him from doing that. And that's pretty wonderful. There's such a generational legacy that comes with this business, because it isn't just me and my siblings that made this farm what it is, right? It was also the work that my dad did, of course, and mom, and the work that my grandparents did. So you're living off of the work and the energy that was put in by previous generations. And it's our job to honor that and continue to move it forward. Now, if none of my kids want to go farming, that's fine. I'm not going to push them to do something they don't want to do. There's a million great things that they could do with their lives. But if they do want to go farming, I want there to be an opportunity here that is at least as interesting to them as going to aerospace engineering or pick your field. I want this to be an opportunity for them that's just as interesting as any of those. So that's kind of what drives us, I think.
That's great. There's something also too, and this is me putting my environmentalist hat on for the moment, but you're stewards of the land, right? You're taking care of that land. whether that means the surrounding land, the watershed, all the things that are around it, the wildlife, you really are contributing to the betterment of that area because you actually care more about the soil and the water and the wildlife in your area because it's going to impact what you do. And I think that's also something really special because not many people can say that nowadays because we live in and around cities. Wildlife might be for us a squirrel, maybe we get excited and see a deer, like that. But that's a different kind of mentality. Those are urban adapters. You're actually seeing it in real time around you and the beauty of the land that you're working and the generations that have poured into that. So I would think that sunrises and sunsets for you hit differently than they would for somebody who's just going to visit a farm because it's a vineyard or they're going to go take pictures at a lavender field or whatever. I think that must just hit differently for you. And to have your kids grow up on that is such an interesting perspective on the world. You're not coming from an inner city situation and seeing soil for the first time. You are actually raising these kids just as much as you're raising these crops around us.
Hi, we're Anns and Sage. And if you're in food production, agriculture, and even running a zoo or an aquarium, we need to talk. Because let's be honest, your operation relies on a lot more technology than most people realize. Rain dryers, hatchery controls, life support systems for animal habitats, all connected, all critical, all often overlooked when it comes to cybersecurity. That's where we come in. At Anns and Sage, we help industries that grow, feed, and inspire the world manage cybersecurity and operational risks. Without the fear tactics, the fluff, or the 200-page audit you'll never read. Whether you're producing milk, processing seafood, or running life support systems, we focus on what matters, keeping your operations safe, your people protected, and your business running, even when things go sideways. And hey, we know not everyone on your team speaks cyber. And because not everyone on your team speaks cyber, we've created a free resource library at annsandsage.com. Inside, you'll find sector-specific infographics built for teams in agriculture, seafood, zoos, and aquariums. They're clear, practical, a little witty, and designed to help frontline teams understand the risks without needing a translator. No logins, no email required, no catch, just usable tools that make cybersecurity stick. If you're responsible for keeping food moving, animals safe, and systems online, Anns and Sage is your partner in real-world resilience. Visit annsandsage.com to download your free infographics, book a consult, or just learn more about how we're helping critical infrastructures secure what matters most. Anns and Sage, helping the industries that grow, feed, and inspire the world manage cybersecurity and operational risks.
While you were talking, I was thinking about what about farming has changed you as a person, meaning and how you lead today, because you have some leadership roles as well. How has farming really informed your perception of the world around you and helped you go out and be able to advocate as well as you do? Because you definitely are a voice. I have read your material. I'll leave some in the show notes for the listeners as well. But what has really driven you to that aspect of being an advocate?
I think before I answer that, I'm just going to go back to what you said earlier. Farmers are, in some sense, the original environmentalists.
They are.
We don't think about it in the same way that it's sort of done today, of course, because some of it gets a little extreme. But the definition of sustainability is what we're trying to do, is to have multi-generational businesses. And something you said earlier was, our fields are sort of like our children, and they kind of are in a sense. I mean, I have four sons, but in some way, I kind of have 16,000 additional children, right?
That's a lot of kids.
Yeah, because you want all of them to improve over time. I mean, really what we're trying to do in our business, and whether we own the land or rent the land, it doesn't matter too much as long as there's some prospect we're going to continue to rent it for the long term, I guess, is we just want to see those acres improve over time. And over the years of farming pieces of land, you do develop an emotional attachment to them. You shouldn't, especially the ones that you rent, because there's always the risk that you can lose them. But there is something very, very deep about managing those pieces of land for a long enough period of time, and the hope that your kids are also going to be able to do so. So there is a very strong connection that comes with that. And I think that leads me to answer the question that you asked. The thing about farming is that it forces you to be humble, because we get it wrong all the time, right? I mean, when we decide what we're going to grow on a specific piece of land this year, because we do grow a variety of crops, whether we're going to, in this time of the year is I guess in June when we're recording this, this is the time of the year when we make those decisions, whether we're going to invest additional dollars into those crops or not. And we often get that wrong because we have no idea what the forecast is going to bring. We have no idea if it's going to rain this week or next week. And we have no idea if a hailstorm is going to come along and wipe it out, or if it's going to freeze in August and ruin it, or if we're going to have a really wet harvest and ruin it. There's all kinds of things that can take it away from us and show us that the decisions we made ended up being wrong. But we make them anyway with the best information that we have. Some of it's a little bit of a gut feel. As much as we can, we try to strip the emotion out of it, but we can't entirely because we just don't know what the weather is going to be tomorrow. So there is a little bit of a gut feel to whether we invest those extra dollars or whether we put those lentils on that field that's a little bit lower ground this year. Maybe there's a risk there that they might flood out or something like that. The fact that we're often getting it wrong means that in anything else that we do in our lives, we're reminded of that luck does drive a significant amount of our success in this business, luck and timing. We can do our best to improve our odds. We can, in a sense, make our own luck. But at the end of the day, regardless of how good of a job we do, we can get every single step right of the growing season and we can still be wrong.
I would think that that's really what people have a misunderstanding about with farming is that what you just described. People just think that it sort of just happens or they don't think about it at all because we live in a very privileged modern world where people don't know where their food comes from. They just go to the grocery store and they get whatever they want. Since there's no seasons in the grocery store, they just assume strawberries are available all the time, which is not true. I mean, yes and no at the same time. I really think that it's a delicate balance ultimately. And you're right, it's not foolproof all the time. It's not 100%. That's something really important that people need to hear, especially those that are working with critical infrastructure and around it and dealing with food systems is it varies. I think this is why I love wine so much. The reason why I love wine, and I've said this on air before, but I'll continue to say it, and you're going to resonate with this, Jake, greatly. Every vintage year is different. The soil, the climate, the people who work it, it's different. It changes. So every glass that you have is special and will never be the same again. Yeah, sure, you can buy the whole vintage year out and it would be the same for those bottles, of course, but the longer you leave it, the more that it develops. I really look back and that's how I think about agriculture. It's never going to be the same every year. You're never going to have the same exact yield. You're not going to have that, you hope, but you don't necessarily know what's going to go down and what's going to happen. The winters will affect what happens, how much rain you get in the spring, that kind of thing. To me, it's almost a privilege to have that moment, to know where your food is coming from and to know what went into making your food is what's really important. And that's why I wish more people understood where their food comes from and the food system, because it's so misunderstood. And we've only lost that over the last few generations where people have just can go in and get whatever, a box of pasta and not understand where that wheat came from and how it was made. And I guess in some ways, I'm just letting you know that there are some of us that are out there, Jake, that actually really do appreciate the work that you do and understand what it takes to get to the food to our table. And every time I sit down to eat, no matter if it's a quick snack or not, the thought goes to thank you very much to the farmer who did this and to the family, the sweat and the blood and the tears and the mental health and everything else that goes into it. But like I was saying, I really think that it's a privilege that it's a privilege to know. And it's also a modern privilege to not know at the same time, because you don't have to slaughter your own chickens. You could just go buy a chicken. You don't have to go, harvest your own wheat. You can just go get it in whatever form it needs to be in: bread, pasta, beyond couscous, which now I'm going to consistently bring that up. So you've actually written a blog and you do a lot of media, Jake. Why did you choose to do that? Because you have so many other things going on, right? You're busy. So what drove you to start doing that and start speaking up and being more of that advocate again?
Yeah, I think it goes to what you've just been talking about, which is that there's so few of us left that are still actually farming. Most people have, moved off the farm into the city. I think in the 1800s, the late 1800s here in Saskatchewan, something like 90% of people were farmers, right? Mm-hmm. Now that's a good thing that's changed, because it was a tough life at that time. People moved off to find things that they were good at. And that's what's given us modern medicine and education, and so many of the things that we all take for granted happened because people were able to move off of the farm. And it's enabled those of us who like farming to be able to get pretty good at it. So these are positive things, but it does come with a downside. People don't know where their food comes from. People don't know who's actually growing their food, that these are human beings. These aren't just faceless corporations that are doing it. These are, for the most part, family farms. Even most of the very large ones are family farms, essentially. So I thought that maybe I could help people just put a face to a name a little bit and see that, oh yeah, this is a human being that's growing my food. And thought maybe I could dispel some myths around that and just kind of share what it's like doing this. Mm-hmm. Just try to talk about some of the things that we deal with and think about on our farms. It's created a lot of opportunities for me. I've been able to talk to people from all walks of life about agriculture and what they think of it. Some people, it doesn't matter what you say or share. Their opinion has been influenced by what they saw in a documentary on Netflix or Google search or something like that, which is frustrating because most of those are quite heavily biased, and there's a lot more dollars that go into writing those sorts of narratives and filming those sorts of narratives than we have on our farm to be able to share anything. But if in some small way I've been able to move the needle, then it's absolutely worth it. And I would also say that the process of writing is one of the very best ways to develop an idea in your head anyway. So if nothing else, the benefit of doing that has been worth it.
Absolutely. And what do you think is actually the biggest misconception of farming? Since you kind of alluded a little bit. So now I'm going to pull on that thread a little bit. What do you think people completely get wrong about farming?
Farmers have choices. We aren't forced to do anything. There aren't these big companies that are making us grow GMOs, that are forcing us to use glyphosate, that are forcing farmers off the land to make room for big corporations to take over. That absolutely has not happened. We make our own choices about what we decide to grow. I choose to grow crops like canola, which are a genetically modified organism, because it gives me the opportunity for better weed control. Simple as that. If it wasn't for the herbicide tolerant trait in canola, we would have a real hard time growing it. And that would be a real shame because it's a good, healthy oil and it has a lot of benefits. That's just one example of a choice that we made on our own farm to better our business and the livelihoods of our family, because there's an opportunity there to do so. Nobody, and the other thing too that I think people get wrong along the same vein is, farmers aren't being forced out of the industry because somebody's literally forcing them out. This process has been going on for centuries of people leaving the farm to do other things since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. People have been leaving farms to go and seek opportunities elsewhere. And I am sure that I would imagine some of our kids will probably do the same, because not everybody is interested in this lifestyle. And it's a positive thing that those of us that are, with some farmers deciding to retire and not have anybody to pass it on to, well, there is an opportunity there for us to grow our business and be able to bring in more of the next generation that is interested. So while our farms are growing, there's still a lot of people on these farms, and we're all working to build our communities and do a lot of the same things our parents and grandparents did in our small towns to try to keep them alive.
And it's about community, and on so many ways, sharing the burdens and helping each other out. That community is so strong. And I think that's something that the rest of the world misses a lot. That's part of the reason why I really love the agriculture community in general, because it's a community of helpers. Everybody wants to see everybody succeed. Everybody's going through the same things because it's about the weather. It's about, what's going on, what you planted, the risks that you took at the beginning of the year. Like you said, as in the stages of planning, everybody feels that sense of and understands it. That's something that it's hard to translate into the technology cybersecurity side of the house, because risk is different for us. We look at risk differently. The risk mindset is different. Your risks are legitimately potentially going to cause strife and issues with your family, whether that's crop failed and you've had a bad year. What does that mean financially? Some people they might have to give up their farm because of it. Those kind of conversations are real. And obviously mental health and things like that. I guess for me, and moving forward, is there a time when you're using the tech that you are wondering about cybersecurity? When does that cross the mind? Speaking of risk, farmers in general are starting to talk about it. I've been in those circles. I'm around those people. When was it kind of like, oh, hey, maybe we should start to be concerned about this? Or, hey, maybe this is a risk factor that we need to include in our annual forecast? Or is it one of those, we'll deal with that next year kind of feeling? Or it's something we'll just put in the back of our head. We know it's there. It's potentially a risk, but we're not going to be able to do anything about it. We're not necessarily going to be a target. And is it something that you do think about at all, Jake, or in general, the farming community?
Yeah, I would say probably the latter two things that you mentioned are probably the most likely scenarios for farmers like myself. We've read the stories, we've heard that we need to do something, but it's sort of that uneasy sort of feeling that sits in the back of our minds that, oh, we should do something about this, but we're busy right now, so we'll do it next we'll do it after seeding, or we'll do it after in-crop spraying, or we'll do it after harvest. We'll do it during the winter when things are quieter. But then winter's gone and we haven't done it. So yeah, we know that we need to do something about it. But for the most part, we just don't know what to do or where to start. So it's easy to put it off.
And since you have a lot of listeners that are in that space right now, the cybersecurity side of the space, is there something you want to say? Is there anything that you can echo to that and to this particular community?
Yeah, well, I think we as farmers have to take responsibility for our own actions and inactions. And we are, like you said, running small to medium-sized businesses. And if this is a risk that we don't do something about and we get hit by it, then we also have to take responsibility for those decisions, because a lack of a decision is still a decision.
Correct.
But I would say that to the cybersecurity industry, that there is an opportunity here for you. Farmers need access to these types of services. We don't know who to talk to. We don't really know where to start. This is not our area of expertise for the most part. So reach out. There's lots of farms have websites these days with contact information. There's probably an opportunity there for you to find a few more clients, because most farmers could use some help on this.
Thank you for that. As we're going to close up in a second, I would like you to give a message out to the next generation or people that are thinking about joining farming, because we obviously need some more first-gen farmers to start filling in the gaps, if you will. And this is a global problem. This isn't just isolated to Canada or the United States. What is the message you would give out to people who are thinking about getting into farming or are moving into the next generation of farming?
I would say first, for anybody interested in farming, agriculture is much bigger than just farming, and we need people in all aspects of agriculture. And so many kids leave high school thinking, well, I'm not going farming, I don't need to take ag. But there's more opportunity in agriculture than in a lot of other industries, and there's going to be for a long time. There's thousands of very, very cool and very interesting careers that you can have within this business, and plant breeding and chemistry and sales and marketing and all manners of different things. So consider it as an option, because I don't think you're ever going to be short of work. To anybody interested in going farming, there is no other lifestyle that you can have where business and lifestyle are so intricately tied together. But having said that, if you treat farming as a lifestyle, it can be a very poor business. But if you treat farming as a business, it can be a really great life. That's a quote from a friend of mine, Jared, and I think it resonates very well. We have to put the first things first in managing our businesses, because if we don't, it won't last. So yeah, I would just say that it's absolutely worth the risk and the stress and everything else, but make sure that you make it a business first.
Thank you for that, Jake. That's really great. You have so many quotable moments in this particular episode. It's fantastic. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for feeding the world. Really appreciate it. And I hope that the cybersecurity and operational technology people that are listening to this particular episode hear you, that, they know, and we're all available as well. So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I enjoyed the opportunity to speak with you today.
That's it for today's episode of the Bites and Bites podcast. Thank you to Jake for giving us a clear look at how farming has evolved and how modern farms actually operate. It's a reminder that people growing our food are running some of the most complex operations out there, and they deserve the same support and security as any other critical sector. If you enjoyed this episode, share it, leave a comment, or tell someone who's interested in agriculture, food, and the systems that connect them. And while you're at it, please do thank a farmer. As always, stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.